Archaea, the home of arcane arts. Once it was a mighty nation of arcanists whose progenies lived and breathed magic. But when mankind was stripped of this blessing, Archaea lost its glory and diminished into a weak shadow of its former self. Left at the mercy of greater powers, the nation pinned its hopes on its only remaining means of survival, a marriage alliance. And this is the fate of our protagonist. In the castle of Archaea, a young man with blonde hair hurriedly enters one of the chambers. Clearly in shock and with his voice choked by disbelief, he demands to be told that this is not true. This young man is Xander Catterell, the second prince of Archaea. With a worried look, he faces his sister, pleading for her to reconsider her decision. "Speak softly, Xander," reprimands the blonde man standing in the room. Meanwhile, a beautiful woman with long, golden hair remains seated in silence, her gaze heavy with a mix of concern and sadness. The atmosphere in the chamber is heavy, almost funereal. The man standing is, in fact, Dietrich Catterell, the first prince of Archaea. He continues to scold his brother, stating that this is not a matter for outsiders. But Xander refuses to listen to his brother, considering the whole situation absurd. How could Dietrich force their own sister to become the wife of Canak Riadon? Upon hearing those words, the seated woman tightly grips the fabric of her dress. Xander, filled with fury, confronts his brother, asking if he has any idea of the rumors circulating. They say that Archaea bought a cowardly peace by prostituting its princess to the enemy, turning her into a mere royal toy for the bloodthirsty tyrant who reaped thousands of lives just for fun. Almost desperately, Xander demands an answer from Dietrich. Why did he do that? With her long golden hair framing her serene face, Eusebia raises her firm gaze to Xander. "Enough," says Eusebia Catterell, the first princess of Archaea and our protagonist in this story. "But Bia," says Xander with a sad look at his sister. Eusebia then explains that the decision was hers, not Dietrich's. It was she who wanted this marriage. She explains to her brother that there is no room for discussion. It was a decision she made, and that is final. She adds that he should worry about other matters now. With tears filling his eyes, he continues trying to argue with his sister. Bia assures her brother that she will be fine and that, from now on, it is his duty to take care of their father and follow Dietrich's guidance. Xander, still unwilling to believe, kneels close to his sister. Xander, worried about his sister's future, leans over her lap and begins to cry. Meanwhile, Bia gently strokes his hair, wishing for him to take care of himself and be well. With a distant look, Dietrich observes the scene in silence. He then thanks Eusebia as he approaches her, saying that the people of Archaea owe their lives to her for what she is doing for them. Bia takes on a serious expression upon hearing her brother's words. She always knew that, for a woman born into royalty, a marriage for love was something unlikely, but she never imagined that her marriage would be the only salvation for Archaea. She knows she should not lament her fate and instead should feel honored to be able to help her people. The scene transitions to Eusebia's wedding. She stands before Canak Riadon as the priest asks if she accepts him as her future husband. She says that she accepts while observing her future husband through the veil. Although a wedding is usually a festive moment filled with joy, the atmosphere was serious and cold. So this is the Emperor of Riadon, Bia thinks as she observes him. The priest declares them husband and wife and asks them to seal the commitment with a kiss. Canak removes the veil covering Bia's face, while she instinctively shrinks back. She sees him clearly for the first time without the veil obscuring her view, and he asks her to close her eyes. Bia tightly closes her eyes as Canak's lips approach hers. They kiss. It is an awkward kiss, but it still makes Bia blush. Their lips part, sealing Bia's and Archaea's fate. Bia is clearly embarrassed by the kiss and thoughtfully touches her lips. Canak, noticing this, asks if she is okay. She does not respond, only looks at him shyly, aware that now that they have kissed before God and all those present, there is no turning back. From today on, the man in front of her is her husband. After the ceremony, the Riadon entourage prepares to depart. Mounted soldiers follow under Canak's leadership, and right behind comes the royal carriage carrying Eusebia. Bia is sitting alone in the carriage, her gaze sad. She thinks about how everything happened so quickly, and it makes her feel like a hostage being taken by force. Thoughtful, she acknowledges that it's not quite like that. Since Riadon is a newborn empire, it makes sense that its emperor wouldn't stay distant for long. Perhaps Canak is a good leader, an emperor who puts the kingdom above himself. Although the rumors surrounding him label him as a butcher and a tyrant, Bia remembers. She opens the carriage window and, leaning a bit, observes the nights ahead. Seeing Kanash in person, she cannot deny that he is a man of presence, almost as if there is something divine about him. She clearly realizes that he inspires respect in everyone around him, unlike her, a sheltered princess who has never had real experience of the world. Compared to him, she feels powerless. Thoughtful, Bia knows that the Cataril lineage, being the ruling house of Archaea, received the blessing of Arganwood. This means that, in each generation, a member of the Cataril lineage awakens to master the primordial magic that flows from the depths of the earth. And this person must use the magic to protect the kingdom as its guardian. She knew she was meant to take on this role in this generation, as she had been chosen by Arganwood as the guardian. With a slight self-deprecating smile, Eusebia acknowledges that the magic she possesses is so weak and limited that it would never be enough to make her a true guardian. Therefore, for someone who saw herself as a failure, accepting the marriage to save the kingdom was the least Eusebia could do for her people. She wonders if she will be able to bear the weight of being the Empress consort. Perhaps she would be cast aside when the Emperor grew tired of her. Feeling weak, Bia thinks to herself that she is pathetic. While Bia is immersed in her thoughts, a hooded figure can be seen in the distance, among the trees. The figure begins to conjure some kind of magic, forming a black energy in its hands. A quick flash catches Eusebia's attention, who looks curiously through the trees. She sees an arrow of black energy swiftly crossing the air towards her. Soon after, a loud crash resonates through the forest. The sound alerts everyone and makes them stop. Kanak, who is further ahead, quickly returns to check, asking the soldiers what happened, with a tone of concern in his voice. They inform their emperor that the Empress's carriage has been attacked. And the Empress? How is she? Is she all right? Kanak asks in panic as he approaches the carriage. Inside the carriage, Eusebia stumbles, her gaze stunned, unable to believe what is happening. With a trembling hand, she touches her chest and feels the arrow of black energy embedded in her body. We are transported to Bia's memories. Probably a few days before the wedding, Eusebia is venting to her brother Dietrich, saying that she doesn't want to leave for Riadon or marry a horrible man like Kanak. She cries at the thought and, filled with fear, begs her brother to find another way to save the kingdom. Dietrich looks her in the eyes and says that it pains him to see his sister suffer, but he asks what else they could do. While stroking his sister's cheek, Dietrich explains that Archaea is dying and that they have no resources against the power of Riadon. He reminds her that the army is exhausted. The coffers are empty, and no nearby kingdom is willing to help Archaea. Looking into his sister's tear-filled eyes, he says that if only they had a bearer of supreme magic to protect Archaea like in the past, perhaps things could be different. But unfortunately, that is not the reality, and they need to do whatever it takes to survive. And with those words from Dietrich, the scene returns to the present. Eusebia, weakened, is sitting on the floor of the carriage with an arrow embedded in her chest. Remembering this, Eusebia thinks that her brother was right. If she had enough power to be a true guardian, everything could be different. Perhaps she could have been more useful to the people of Archaea, and things would have been different. After this thought, Eusebia faints. She hears the screams calling for the Empress, and then the desperate voice of Kanak asking her to wake up. Then, Eusebia awakens startled. Confused, she remembers being hit by an arrow. But after that, she remembers nothing else. Eusebia hears Kanak, desperate, calling her name behind her and turns to look. She sees him holding her unconscious body in his arms. Almost crying, Kanak whispers, pleading for her to open her eyes. Confused, she panics upon seeing her body in Kanak's arms. The soldiers, worried to see Kanak's despair, comment that they believe the Empress has already passed away. He pulls her body against him and murmurs softly that it was his fault. Still holding her in his arms, he says he was foolish to trust the northern dogs. Consumed by rage, he says he should never have agreed to participate in their little game. Eusebia, in a ghostly form, shows concern. He turns to the soldiers and declares that the alliance is annulled. Gritting his teeth, he swears that Archaea will pay for the betrayal with its own blood. As he orders his soldiers to hurry home and prepare for war, Eusebia screams, trying to stop him. But Kanak seems unable to hear or see her. The pain is so intense that she feels as if something is tearing her chest apart. Despair overtakes her as she realizes what is happening, while the pain causes her to fall to the ground. She knows that if she does nothing, Archaea will be destroyed. As the soldiers and Kanak depart, Eusebia, still agonizing on the ground, sees someone approaching. The person touches the dry blood on the ground while saying, poor creature. You stopped breathing even before the blood on the ground had dried? Dietrich, thinks Eusebia as she notices the movement near her. In her ghostly form, she begins to crawl towards him, confident that he might be able to see her. But as she gets closer, a man appears before Dietrich, saying that finally the plan seems to be going in the right direction, and that His Highness must be pleased with the progress. Dietrich, still looking at the blood on his hands, replies that he certainly is. With a cold smile on his face, he looks at the man and says that he is extremely pleased to have finally rid himself of the nuisance that was Eusebia. Bia is in shock upon hearing the words coming from her brother's mouth. Dietrich stands up and walks towards the hooded man. He says it is a shame they took his sister's body, as he would have liked to confirm her death personally. But the hooded man reassures him. He assures that the arrow pierced her heart and that there was no way she could have survived. Meanwhile, Eusebia watches the conversation completely incredulous. Dietrich points at the hooded man, reminding him that the agreement between them is not yet over. He states that he only allowed him to deal with his sister as he saw fit because the man had promised to give Dietrich the power to destroy Riadon. Smiling confidently, the hooded man asserts that His Highness will be pleased to know that the approaching war will end with Archaea's triumph, and that, under King Dietrich's command, Archaea will triumph as an empire that spans the entire continent. After saying this, the hooded man begins to walk towards Eusebia's ghost, stating that the biggest problem with Canuck taking her body is that, having been born as a mage, she could have been useful. It is truly a shame, he concludes as he passes through Eusebia's ghostly body, which remains in shock with everything she hears. She mentally wonders why, trying to understand and remembering how close she and Dietrich were when they were children. Eusebia remains alone, fallen in her spectral form beside the abandoned carriage. The silence of the crime scene envelops her, leaving her surrendered only to her own thoughts. And so, as the hooded man had promised, a bitter war broke out between Archaea and Riadon in the months that followed. And, in the meantime, she became a ghost, trapped in the forest where she was killed, forced to watch the tragedy of her kingdom unfold before her eyes. A true hell, being forced to see everything and being able to do nothing. Time passed slowly. It was torturous for her, and the war showed no signs of ending anytime soon. Accusing Riadon of murdering a princess of Archaea, Dietrich tried to win the war by rallying the outraged northern kingdoms under his banner. But it didn't take long for Canuck to destroy them all. He won battle after battle, bringing Archaea closer and closer to destruction. With the war, everything lost its meaning. The forests and blooming fields of beautiful Archaea were reduced to ruins. The people of Archaea were still, the people Eusebia loved most. She was forced to witness their lives fading before her eyes. After 3 years of war, Dietrich was finally captured and brought to trial before Emperor Canuck. And, even close to the end, Dietrich did not seem remorseful for anything he had done. Before Canuck, he merely insulted him, calling him a filthy slave, and swore that, even having killed his family and plundered that noble land, he would still never truly win. For the Catteril family would haunt him for the rest of his life. Canuck stares at Dietrich with a half-cold smile and replies that he hopes his delusions never cease. In this way, he will be able to follow the mad screams of the king of Archaea even after death, and kill him once more, declares Canuck, filled with hatred, as he raises his sword against Dietrich. A loud slash echoes through the forest as Canuck finally attacks Dietrich. Eusebia covers her mouth in shock, her eyes wide and filled with horror. A strong sound of something heavy falling to the ground echoes, marking the brutal impact of her brother's end. The silhouette of Canuck rises imposing, holding the bloodied sword, marking the end of the war and the defeat of Archaea. Among swords embedded in the bloodied ground, the spirit of Eusebia appears, bent in sadness. With a choked voice, she calls for her brother. She asks if his ambition was really worth the sacrifice of her sister's life. His brother, their father, and his beloved Archaea. Bia laughs sickly, as if she has finally reached her limit. She looks thoughtfully at the sky and says, "Hear me, Arganwood. Listen to my pleas and grace me with your power and mercy. Take my soul and in return grant a new chance for our Archaea." Bia screams in despair. At that moment, a small greenish light begins to shine near her. With tears streaming down her face, Eusebia begs Arganwood to grant her help to start over and prevent all that tragedy from happening. "Eusebia, my dear child," responds a voice as the greenish light shines more brightly. That light envelops everything around, responding to Eusebia's cry. A voice continues to speak, now muffled and incomprehensible. Bia loses consciousness. The scene cuts to her slowly opening her eyes, blinking in confusion. When her vision comes back into focus, she sees the younger, worried faces of her father and her younger brother. Both breathe a sigh of relief and show their happiness upon seeing that she has finally woken up. Eusebia blinks, now even more confused. Xander wraps her in a tight hug, while their father simply smiles, relieved. The only thing she can murmur is, "But how?" The scene advances, showing Eusebia sitting on the bed next to Xander, both visibly younger. She remains silent, trying to organize her thoughts and understand what could have happened. None of it seems real to her. She had seen with her own eyes when they died in the war. Even so, they were there before her, alive and well. Thinking about this, Eusebia turns to her father, who was talking to the royal doctor. He was explaining to the king that the young woman's malaise was just a side effect of awakening her powers. The doctor declares that the change in hair and eye color, combined with the recent malaise, is clear evidence that Eusebia has been chosen to take on the role of guardian of Archaea. However, he emphasizes that little is known about what powers she may manifest, as the last guardian had emerged over 100 years ago. Upon hearing those words, Eusebia remembers that magic awakened within her when she was 10 years old. The revelation hits her like lightning. It could only mean one thing. She had gone back in time? Still incredulous, Eusebia begins to tremble as she remembers all the horrors she was forced to witness. Perhaps, she thinks, she had finally gone mad, and all of this was just her mind creating a cruel hallucination. Xander, noticing his sister trembling, immediately becomes worried. With a voice full of affection, he says he doesn't want to see her sick, that he wishes to spend many, many years by her side. Hearing her brother act so familiarly, Eusebia slowly turns to him. She extends her hands toward his face. Feeling Xander's soft, warm face under her fingers, Eusebia convinces herself that this could not be a hallucination. Relieved, Eusebia rests her head on Xander's shoulder. She begins to cry as she realizes that Arganwood truly heard her prayers. Overcome with emotion, she hugs Xander tightly. Both Xander and their father are confused by Bia's intense reaction. But in silence, she thanks Arganwood for granting her a new chance and promises that she will not waste this opportunity. This time, she will protect her family and her kingdom at all costs. And for that, she knows she will need power, a power stronger than she had in the past. Our protagonist tells us about Arganwood, the patron goddess of Archaea. In life, she had been the human sister of the goddess Fehar, but after her death, she was reborn as the great silver tree in the forest, at the edge of the world, which became her tomb. The kingdom of Archaea bordered this sacred ground. The people of Archaea began to worship and revere Arganwood, and the forest, in return, granted its grace to them. Those who received Arganwood's blessing became guardians of Archaea, heroes tasked with protecting the people from any disaster or enemy. And without guardians to keep the kingdom protected, Archaea was on the brink of total collapse. When the guardian powers awakened in Eusebia, it was as if a spark of hope had ignited for the people of Archaea. She was the delight and treasure of the kingdom, until they discovered that she could not use her magic the way they desired and expected. Eusebia's power was limited to the ability to speak with trees and flowers, and no matter how kind the trees were to her, Eusebia felt like a failure as a guardian. After all, kindness was not enough in the face of the discontent of all the people of Archaea. Remembering how, in her past life, she could only watch helplessly as Archaea faced destruction, Eusebia was determined to make things different this time. After all, Arganwood would not have granted her wish if it did not give her the power to change the past. As she thinks about all this, Eusebia channels her power into the vase in front of her, and the effort is so great that it begins to glow. From the intense glow in the vase, a small green sprout emerges, softly shimmering as particles of light dance around it. Eusebia is surprised to see the sprout grow, but she is not impressed. She expected something bigger, stronger, worthy of a guardian. In silence, she wonders why Arganwood would bring her back to life without giving her the power she truly needs. Compared to the past, she clearly feels that her magic is stronger. But still, it does not seem enough. To save Archaea from Canuck, her thoughts are interrupted by knocks on the door. A familiar voice greets her, and she immediately startles. Her body reacts instinctively, as if that sound awakened uncomfortable memories. Dietrich is leaning against the doorframe of Eusebia's room, greeting her. "Brother?" she replies, clearly uncomfortable. Ignoring his sister's reaction, Dietrich enters the room and comments that he heard about her magic awakening. Still smiling, Dietrich remarks that the awakening of his sister's magic involved a great deal of pain, or at least that is what he heard. As she looks at him, Eusebia can almost hear the older version of him from her past life echoing in her mind, talking about her death with the same sarcastic tone. She begins to hallucinate, mixing past and present. Before her eyes, an adult Dietrich appears, his hand firmly gripping her neck while a cruel smile spreads across his face. He mocks her death, each word laden with scorn. Instinctively, she slaps his hand away, pushing him back. In the blink of an eye, she returns to the present, where she sees the younger Dietrich in front of her, surprised by her reaction. Realizing what she just did, she quickly apologizes to her brother, saying that she still feels a bit unwell. And she adds that she is sure he will understand that she is not in a good moment. Dietrich, clearly irritated, responds that, of course, he understands. After all, his poor sister must be exhausted. He holds Eusebia's hands, making her visibly uncomfortable, and wishes for her to recover soon. Everything he says sounds like a lie to Eusebia. She cannot, and should not, trust any word that comes out of her brother's mouth. Perhaps this is because in her past life she saw his true colors. She begins to pull her hands away, asking her brother to let her go, but he still holds them firmly, saying he is sorry to have to bring her bad news just when she is in such a fragile moment. Bia is surprised and, with a worried voice, questions her brother about what he means by bad news. With a disdainful smile, he replies that instead of celebrating the new guardian of Archaea, many people have begun to question Arganwood's wisdom. Dietrich states, in a provocative tone, that many have dared to doubt the magical power of the new princess guardian. Bia is surprised and begins to respond, but Dietrich interrupts her, asserting that he does not believe in the blasphemy of these people and that his sister's awakening was a true miracle. He continues in a cynical tone, "But you know what they say. Where there's smoke, there's fire." Perhaps people are just desperate for the guardian they have long awaited to show the full extent of her power. Dietrich concludes. Bia begins to try to explain herself, incredulous at what she is hearing. But Dietrich interrupts her again, saying that she should not blame herself, that the real blame lies with the people for creating such high expectations for a simple little girl. Dietrich's words and tone remind her of her past life, when she ran to him, excited, to tell him that she had managed to use magic. When she said, full of enthusiasm, how incredible it had been to see the memories and hear the stories of the flowers, and how excited she was to discover more and more about her magic. She recalls her brother's sarcastic and cruel smile, telling her that rumors were circulating about her power, that what she called magic seemed merely a cheap trick, and that everyone was extremely disappointed. And because of that, he claimed that she should hide that pathetic magic and not worry, for he would protect her. And hearing her brother's words, she hid her powers, which made people anxious and start to question when they would finally see the gifts of the guardian. Rumors began to circulate that perhaps what the princess had received was not a blessing, but rather a curse. And in this way, she blindly trusted her brother, and ended up being betrayed by him. Remembering her death in her past life makes Eusebia return from her thoughts, feeling slightly dizzy. Dietrich, seeing his sister like this, asks if she is okay, but she cannot respond. Ghostly hands rest on Eusebia's shoulders, and a mocking voice whispers, "Just look at you. Still so weak." The ghost of her past life envelops her from behind in a suffocating embrace, whispering with disdain, "How could someone still so weak be capable of protecting Archaea? You can do nothing." In panic, Bia tries to convince herself that this is just a trick of her mind, that it is not real. Still, her ghostly self continues to speak, saying that she was never chosen by Arganwood, that she did not earn a second chance, and that her goddess only wanted to see her suffer in despair once again. Frightened, Eusebia tries to free herself from the ghost of her past life, desperately moving her arms to push it away, while in her mind she denies everything she heard. Dietrich, still in the room, watches his sister with a confused expression at her reaction. With the ghostly figure disappearing, Eusebia breathes heavily, but relieved. He asks again if she is okay, and she quickly replies that she is. The ghostly figure from her past returns and envelops her in a dark embrace, but despite being shaken, Eusebia remains firm. She knows she needs to go to Arganwood, discover the truth, and eliminate the doubt in her mind once and for all. She needs to know if all of this is just a whim of a deity, or if there is a greater purpose. Determined, she promises herself that she will find out what Arganwood really wants from her, even if it is the last thing she does. The scene cuts to Eusebia, accompanied by 2 guards, walking through a snowstorm in the wild forests of the north, on the edges of the world. The guards are worried about her, advising that she should return as the snowstorm is intensifying. but Bia stares at them with a determined look. Holding a necklace shaped like an amulet, with a red stone in the center, she declares that she cannot return. At least, not yet. We are transported to Eusebia's memories a few days earlier. She is talking to her father, asking for permission to go to the wild forests, and he shows concern at his daughter's request. Sensing her father's worry, she explains that now that she is awakened, she needs to present herself to Arganwood. Her father explains that no one besides the monarchs of Archaea can enter the presence of Arganwood. Even the kings of Archaea are entitled to only one audience in their lifetime. He recalls that once he knelt on the sacred ground and begged Arganwood to resurrect the queen. But the goddess refused to listen to his prayers, no matter how intense and fervent they were. Arganwood responded by saying that resurrection was against the will of the goddess Fihar. In the end, all that was left for me was pain and a weakened body, marked by the biting cold of those dark forests, says the king, bitterly as he recalls the past. He gently touches his daughter's face, fearing that something terrible will happen if she goes to the wild forest. But Bia reassures him, saying that she will be fine and promises to return safe and sound. She asserts that, as the guardian of Archaea and princess of the bloodline chosen by Arganwood, she is sure that the goddess will not harm her. However, she needs direction to know how to save the kingdom. Understanding his daughter's need, the king begins to search for something inside his coat. He pulls out a necklace with a red stone from inside the coat and hands it to Eusebia, telling her to take it with her. He explains that the necklace is actually a magical item forged by dwarves, capable of preserving warmth, and asserts that he is sure it will be useful to protect her in the snowstorm. We return to the present as Eusebia looks at the necklace in her hands. She knows she will be able to continue, for the necklace is protecting her from the cold. She clutches the necklace between her two hands while whispering a thank you to her father for the help. In a silent promise that she will not lose the people she loves anymore, that she will do everything to change the fate of all and save them. She kneels on the sacred ground and places her bare hands on the ground. Although she knows her magic is still weak, she remembers how to use the ability she had in her past life. An intense light shines, and a magic circle forms beneath Bia as she tries to use her magic to communicate with the trees of the forest. Focusing, she pleads with the trees for an audience with Arganwood. She asks for permission to enter the forest. Suddenly, the snowstorm begins to weaken. Bia believes this can only be a sign that Arganwood has heard her. She turns to the guards and asks them to wait for her there, assuring them that she will return soon. And then, she disappears, entering the forest. The cold is much more intense inside the forest, as if her bones are freezing. Even so, Bia continues to move forward, determined, until a warm, glowing breeze envelops her, and she hears Arganwood's voice greeting her. She looks ahead, and as the snowstorm dissipates, she sees an imposing tree with silver leaves, and she is sure that is Arganwood. So, we meet again. "What brings you to me this time?" says Arganwood. Eusebia is surprised to recognize the voice, the same one she heard calling her before she went back in time. Eusebia then politely asks for guidance. She questions the purpose for which she was brought back to life and what she must do to prevent the terrible future she witnessed. She pleads with Arganwood to grant her more power to protect the people of Archaea, and in return promises to be the instrument of the goddess's divine will. But before she can continue, Arganwood interrupts her. The goddess says, "It seems you have deluded yourself." She explains that she has indeed been watching her all this time, but has never answered her pleas. That this privilege is granted only to the monarchs of Archaea, and only to them. But that no one should know this. Ashamed, Bia explains that she knows this, but insists that she is sure it was the goddess's voice she heard in her past life, and that she thought it was she who brought her to life and gave her a second chance. Go home, Eusebia. Your fragile mortal body cannot withstand the intense cold of these forests. Not even the dwarf's necklace will protect you for much longer. Leave, before you share the same fate as your father, says the goddess. I don't care, says Bia, opening her arms before Arganwood. I would rather die here than watch everyone I love perish in the war without being able to stop it. She screams towards the goddess. The goddess calls her by name in a reprimanding tone, and Eusebia raises her eyes to Arganwood on the verge of tears, whispering a fragile, "Please." She kneels before the grand tree and begs to be allowed to protect everyone this time, to be allowed to save Archaea. "Please, tell me what I can do," Bia pleads, her voice trembling. Arganwood's voice echoes firmly among the silver trees. "If this is your determination, it leaves me no choice. Although you were a guardian, your magic was weak, because I no longer had enough power to share. For this reason, I carry part of the blame for the pain you suffered in your past life. Therefore, I have decided to share with you what remains of my life force. Perhaps this way you can challenge fate and change the future of Archaea." As she utters these words, Arganwood emanates a greenish light that projects towards Eusebia. At that moment, Eusebia's insecurities begin to torment her again, and she hears the voice of the ghost from her past whispering, "You must not believe the goddess." The ghost envelops her in a suffocating embrace and begins to implant insecurities in her mind, whispering that she will not be able to change anything, and that she is destined to have a miserable death again. In the background, however, the goddess's voice resonates firmly, saying that Eusebia needs to follow her heart, and that if she does, nothing can stop her. Refuting the ghost's words, Eusebia places her hands on the ground and invokes Arganwood's power, shouting that she will not give up. Even if her destiny is to die, she refuses to surrender. From the point where Bia's hands touch the ground, green, vibrant, energy-filled shoots begin to sprout. The shoots transform into green, sturdy branches that begin to rise towards the sky, as Arganwood's energy flows even more intensely through Eusebia. "I will no longer succumb to my fears," Eusebia screams, making a promise to herself. The scene cuts to a military stronghold, with wooden walls reinforced by vigorous green vines. One of the guards on duty yawns, almost falling asleep. His superior passes by, sees the scene, and gives him a slap on the back of the neck, reprimanding him to stay alert. The guard apologizes, but the superior reminds him that, even with the recent tranquility, he is still a border guard. The superior then notices someone approaching. Eusebia approaches, escorted by 2 guards. Now, at 20 years old, it is clear that the story has advanced 10 years since her last encounter with Arganwood. The captain talks to Bia as if he sees her frequently. He says that since she started helping to guard the kingdom's borders, casualties have decreased significantly. She smiles and says she is happy to help. The captain emphasizes that calling it help is an understatement. He comments that the thorny bushes she conjured on the walls have doubled the fort's defensive capacity. Furthermore, the shields and arrows she created have proven to be extremely effective, even against monsters. The captain looks at her sincerely, apologizes if it sounds inappropriate, but admits that he feels a bond of camaraderie with her, as if they had faced a war side by side. Upon hearing the word war, Bia gives a slightly bitter smile, remembering the 3 long years she witnessed the horrors of war as a ghost in her last life. She softens her smile and comments that the captain is more perceptive than he appears. He, confused, watches her without fully understanding what she meant. Bia tells us that it has been 10 years since she traveled through time, and that during this period, she has dedicated herself intensely to her studies. Moreover, she has learned to use her magic more effectively. The blessing of Arganwood has strengthened her powers, and over time, Bia has developed the ability to accelerate and modify the growth of plants. But all this evolution came at a cost. Eusebia had to dedicate herself intensely over the last 10 years, often studying until exhaustion. Even in this life, Eusebia continued to hear disturbing news about Riadon and its emperor, Kanak. The fact that Riadon was expanding faster than in her past life was concerning, as they would soon reach Archaea. No matter how much the kingdom's military strength improved under her command, Eusebia knew they were still not strong enough to defeat Kanak and his empire. Even so, Bia was determined not to let Kanak destroy Archaea this time. Eusebia's thoughts are interrupted by a guard who runs up to her and the captain. He announces that he brings urgent news about Kanak and the Riadon Empire. Bia is surprised, but is willing to do anything to save her kingdom, even if it means having to marry Kanak. The scene cuts to the castle of Archaea, where a messenger reads Kanak's message. In it, he asks for only one thing: the princess of Archaea. Nothing more. Upon hearing this, one of the nobles present in the meeting room with Eusebia stands up angrily, calling Kanak's request absurd. Another noble then declares that a savage like him will never have the princess of Archaea. While the nobles argue, Bia continues sipping her tea. She can't help but compare their attitude today with that of her past life. Before, the same people who gave up on her without hesitation now show indignation at Kanak's request, only because the current Eusebia has proven to be useful to the kingdom in this life. The only thing that hasn't changed from the past was Kanak's request. He, a slave who broke his chains to rise as emperor. His struggles may have been just as hard, or even more degrading than the life I had to endure. Is that what turned him into such a cruel and relentless man? Thinks Eusebia. But that's not my concern, she concludes. Dietrich, who is also in the room, asks the nobles what they suggest doing, since they are so outraged by Kanak's proposal. He makes it clear in his tone that he hopes they do not believe Archaea has a chance of winning a war against the forces of Riadon. As much as it pains me, I, as the crown prince of Archaea, must think of my kingdom before myself, declares Dietrich in an almost dramatic performance. Eusebia, watching the scene, can only think about how false her brother is. All that posturing, when deep down he just wants to get rid of her. He continues looking at his sister with a smile, certain that he will have her understanding. After all, she is the guardian of Archaea. With a smile on her face, Bia assures her brother that she understands the situation. Then, confidently, Eusebia declares that she has been waiting for this opportunity her whole life. A week passes. Dietrich enters Eusebia's chambers, congratulating her on her engagement. She, serious, asks why he came to bother her so late at night. Pretending to be offended by his sister's coldness, he replies that he just wanted to say goodbye, since she will be leaving for Riadon the next day after the wedding. He continues with the drama, stating that they will not see each other often anymore and that she should be kinder to her brother. Bia interrupts him, saying she prefers to keep his conversations brief. Annoyed, he throws a blue necklace onto the table in front of Bia. She picks up the necklace, curious, and as she examines it, Dietrich explains that it is not just an ornament. It is a communication crystal, an item that allows communication over long distances. He leans over the table towards Bia and orders her to take the necklace with her, reporting everything she discovers about Kanak while she is in Riadon. But Dietrich says that the marriage is just a temporary alliance, a perfect excuse to buy time and gain knowledge about Riadon. Worried, Bia gets up from her chair and warns her brother that things will not end well if Kanak finds out, and that this could lead to war. Could it? Ah, my sweet and innocent sister, replies Dietrich sarcastically. There will be a war. We are just preparing better for it. That is the real reason I came to see you tonight, reveals Dietrich, leaving Eusebia in shock. Dietrich continues, his voice laden with confidence. An ally with unimaginable powers? How did I not realize it before? Dietrich could not have obtained such a rare magical item so easily. Only a powerful sorcerer could have created this for him, concludes Bia in her thoughts. Again, Dietrich must have allied himself with that hooded man who attacked Eusebia in her past life. And besides that, he had found another reason to ally with the other kingdoms of the continent. This way, a new great war was inevitable. Eusebia is pulled from her thoughts when Dietrich demands an answer from her. She knows that if she refuses his request, Dietrich will likely resort to the other alternative, to kill her. Is there really no way to prevent destiny from repeating itself? I really thought I would be able to prevent the war with all the effort I put in over the last 10 years. But are we doomed to repeat the same fate? Reflects Eusebia, filled with doubt and despair. Seeing her sister's silence, Dietrich asks if she really believed that the simple fact of marrying Kanak would bring peace to Archaea. He continues in a sarcastic tone, saying that he had no idea how foolish and blind his sister was. Bia, realizing that her brother knows more than he is revealing, directly questions him about what he means. Dietrich throws a stack of papers onto the table and says he brought those secret documents especially for her. He reveals that the guardians of Archaea are cursed to remain sterile for their entire lives, as becoming a guardian means relinquishing their entire being to serve Arganwood. Besides being unable to use their magic outside the realm of Archaea, they will also be unable to pass on magic to their children, because her body lost the ability to reproduce the moment Arganwood chose her as a guardian. In shock from what she heard from Dietrich, Eusebia stares at him and says that he is lying, but he assures her that it is all true, claiming to have found this information in secret documents from the library, to which only kings have access. Imagine Kanak's fury and disappointment when he discovers that the bride he bought in exchange for a peace alliance is sterile and unable to give him heirs. Provokes Dietrich, moving closer to Bia. Whispering in her ear, he concludes that Kanash will burn Archaea until only ashes remain to calm his fury. Bia stands up, pushing her brother away from her, saying that she is tired of hearing his lies. Dietrich grabs her shoulder and says that she does not need to believe his word. Just think logically. Isn't it strange that no matter how rich the available information is, the names of Guardian's children have never been mentioned in the kingdom's books? Bia is in shock, staring at her brother as she struggles in her mind to decide if this could really be true. At that moment, the scene transitions to a lake. The silhouette of a man is reflected in the water of the lake, which is now stained with blood. They attacked us as soon as we crossed the border, says Kanak, naked as he washes himself after the ambush. One of his soldiers brings him new clothes and comments that it is not so surprising that they attacked, since they knew Kanak would not be wearing armor, making him an easier target to take down. "Shut up and give me those clothes already. After all, I need to be clean and presentable before receiving a princess," says Kanak, extending his hand towards the soldier. The next day, we see Bia on the castle balcony. One of her maids asks her to come inside, as it is cold and she might catch a cold. The maid, worried to see the princess so pale on her wedding day, asks if something is bothering her, as she seems to have not slept well the night before. The comment from her maid makes Bia remember the conversation she had with Dietrich the night before. After the conversation with her brother, Eusebia spent the night awake reading books about the history of Archaea. No book mentions the name of children born to guardians. It makes sense that a child conceived by a mage would inherit the ability to use magic from their father or mother. Eusebia becomes anxious, fearing that the most likely reason Kanak insists on marrying her is to ensure heirs capable of using magic. But unlike mages, the magic of guardians comes from the blessing of the goddess Arganwood. It is not something they are born with, but something they gain during life after being chosen by the goddess. She concludes that Dietrich was right, and guardians cannot have children. But what should she do? If Kanak finds out, he will annul the marriage and break the alliance. Bia is pulled from her thoughts by the guards' voices announcing the arrival of the Emperor of Riadon. She turns her attention to the Riadon delegation, entering the gates of the castle of Archaea, led by Kanak, who pauses for a second upon noticing that she is watching him, causing their gazes to meet for a moment. In one of the castle's rooms, she searches her mind for what she might do about her newly discovered problem. She bites her nail anxiously, forcing herself to think. She recalls that, the night before, her brother tried to convince her to join him instead of simply killing her as he had done in her past life. He even revealed the truth about the Guardians, using it as a push for her to accept his proposal. Although this represents a good evolution compared to the past, Eusebia is sure that Dietrich still sees her only as a useful piece in his game. So, at least for Dietrich, as long as she remains useful, he will think twice before killing her. Perhaps if she does the same thing with the Emperor, things will work out, as long as she can keep the secret of being infertile. As soon as she concludes her thoughts, the door to the room opens abruptly, startling her slightly. Kanak approaches Bia, looking a bit anxious, as she stands up and begins to move closer to him. She maintains the appropriate etiquette for the occasion and says she is honored to finally meet him in person. The Emperor delicately extends his hand towards Bia's face. Instinctively, she takes a small step back when his hand touches her cheek. Kanak is surprised by the reaction of his future wife. "You seem unhappy with this arranged marriage," he comments. Eusebia tries to correct the Emperor's impression, stating that he is mistaken and that, in fact, she feels immensely honored and grateful for the chance to become Empress Consort. But he interrupts her, saying that her lies are as lovely as her beautiful lips. Addressing him as Your Majesty, she asserts that she would never dare to lie to him. However, the Emperor seems frustrated with the formal and cold tone with which he is being treated. He asks her to stop calling him Your Majesty, saying he prefers that she call him by his name, if that is not a problem for her. Confused, she apologizes if she has offended him, explaining that etiquette requires her to address him this way. Kanak interrupts her, asking if, should he start calling her by her name, she would also call him that. Bia is left speechless, as such an interaction had never happened in her past life. "Eusebia," says Kanak in a firm tone as he looks her in the eyes. Noticing Bia's lack of response, Kanak asks if she at least knows his name. She promptly replies that yes, she knows. She looks at him for a moment and, embarrassed, pronounces his name. Kanak. The scene cuts to Eusebia's maid with tears in her eyes, impressed by her beauty in her wedding dress. She wipes her tears and says it breaks her heart to see the princess forced into such a hastily arranged marriage. She claims that the princess deserves much more than that. But Bia, looking at herself in the mirror, says she feels absolutely beautiful. She remembers that the dress she is wearing now is much more beautiful and extravagant than the one she wore in her previous life. Still crying, the maid hugs Bia around the waist, begging her not to abandon her. Eusebia gently tries to console her. Bia knows that leaving the Empire would mean putting her life at risk, especially since the man she is going to marry has taken her kingdom hostage, hoping that his empress will be able to give him children with the power to use magic. As she walks with her wedding dress towards the altar, she is sure that her thoughts are correct, and to protect Archaea, she needs to make Kanak believe that she is capable of meeting his expectations. She delicately places her hand over his as the priest recites the words of the wedding. They need to become husband and wife, and not enemies on a battlefield. When the priest asks them to kiss, thus sealing the union, Eusebia raises her gaze towards Kanak as he gently touches her face. He still looks exactly the same, she thinks, with an almost nostalgic tone. But unlike the past, when he seemed more like a god than a man to her, now, after everything she has witnessed, he no longer inspires her with reverence. As his lips approach hers, she can only think that this is not a marriage, but a tool she will use to maintain peace. Therefore, no matter what happens, her heart must remain indifferent. But her reasoning is interrupted by the surprise of his kiss. Kanak kisses her passionately, invading her mouth with his tongue as he pulls her even closer to him. The surprise makes her try to pull away from him for a moment. Realizing this, he interrupts the kiss and looks at her. She, extremely embarrassed, has cheeks redder than a bell pepper. The guests are also surprised and slightly embarrassed by the intensity of that kiss in public, except for Dietrich, who looks extremely irritated. Eusebia tries to organize her thoughts after the intense kiss, taking a deep breath as she tries to regain her composure. Worried, Kanak calls her name, asking if she is okay. This time, unlike her past life, there was no banquet after the wedding. And as soon as the wedding was over, Kanak's soldiers began to prepare for departure. For some reason, the commission seemed to be in a hurry to leave. Eusebia looks thoughtfully at the castle of Archaea, as if she wants to memorize every detail before leaving for Riadon. She is wearing the necklace with the blue pendant that her brother gave her, which reveals that she accepted Dietrich's proposal to become his spy. Bia remembers Dietrich's sickly smile when she accepted the necklace, hearing him say that her decision was a step on the path to Archaea's salvation. Her thoughts are interrupted by Kanak's voice, who approached her and said that, by the look on her face, leaving Archaea must be extremely painful. Eusebia stares at Kanak, and her thoughts automatically flow to the concern for her duty as a wife. If he realizes that she cannot give him an heir, everything could crumble, and her plans to prevent a war from starting will go down the drain. But Kanak looks thoughtfully at Bia's face, and this makes him remember something. He asks for permission and starts to walk towards the carriage that will take Eusebia. Looking at the carriage, he says that he knows it is considered a taboo in Archaea for newlyweds to share the same carriage, but he insists that he cannot allow her to be alone, especially seeing her so downcast about leaving Archaea. With those words, he kneels on the ground in front of the carriage. Soon after, he looks at Eusebia and extends his hand towards her, clearly being a knight and helping her to board the carriage. Eusebia is surprised and worried to see the emperor kneeling before her. But noticing her reaction, he says that if she doesn't want the emperor to remain kneeling, she should hurry and get into the carriage. Bia accepts Kanak's kindness, unable to stop thinking about how everything was happening in such a curious and different way this time, so distinct from what she experienced in her past life. First was his visit before the wedding, and now he was kneeling before her. She knows that no matter how much things have changed, she should remain indifferent. Still, blushing slightly, Bia admits to herself that she cannot help but feel a slight attraction that did not exist before. Our protagonist wonders if these changes mean a brighter future for everyone, or if they are just a harbinger of disaster. Kanak, noticing Eusebia distractedly looking out the window since the moment they entered the carriage, asks her if she is very upset. She looks at him, not understanding why he thinks she is upset. He replies that, from the expressions on her face, either she is upset about something, or she is planning her escape route from a marriage she never wanted. Bia is clearly irritated by Kanak's comment, saying that he is making an absurd accusation against her. She places her hand over her chest as if making an oath, and proudly declares that, as his legitimate wife, she must now fulfill all the duties of a consort empress. Kanak crosses his arms and lets out a small, sarcastic laugh upon hearing the word duties. He then asks Bia if all princesses are as devoted as she is. A bit irritated, he continues to question her ironically, asking if she was just fulfilling her duty when she kissed the man she despises so much at the altar. Eusebia, not understanding Kanak's reaction, looks at him confused. She apologizes for being so direct, but cannot help but ask him, "What is his problem? You seem to believe that I can't even stand to look at you." Bia tells Kanak, trying to understand his stance. Kanak sighs, bringing his hand to his forehead thoughtfully. He then admits that, in fact, there is something he has wanted to ask her since the moment they met. He looks at her and asks, "What kind of person am I in your eyes?" An unexpected and dangerous question, which leaves our protagonist a bit worried and anxious. She begins to recite as if she were reading a book. Stories of your brave deeds had reached my ears long before the marriage negotiations began, including the matter of your origin, of course. Kanak, clearly dissatisfied, states that he is not interested in the stories people tell about him. What he wants to know is what she really thinks of him. Looking into her eyes, he asks, "Who am I to Eusebia Cataril? Do you see me as a hero?" The question, accompanied by genuine curiosity in his words, surprises Eusebia. She stammers, trying to find an answer, while memories of what happened in her previous life begin to flood her mind. Seeing her frightened expression, Kanak concludes that he was right, and that no matter how much they are married now, she cannot even hide how much she hates him. He says she turned pale as snow after the wedding ceremony ended, as if she found the whole event repulsive. "You really find this marriage repulsive? Unfortunately, my suspicions were correct," says Kanak, looking out the carriage window. Eusebia seems to wake from her shock when Kanak finishes speaking. She realizes she cannot let him nullify the marriage. She quickly stands up, asserting that he misunderstood everything and that she does not find him or the marriage repulsive. Concerned, Kanak tells Bia that she should sit down as it is dangerous to stand and she might lose her balance. As soon as he says this, something outside startles the horse pulling the carriage, causing it to stop abruptly. Inside the carriage, Eusebia stumbles and loses her balance with the sudden stop. She closes her eyes tightly, bracing for the pain from the likely fall. But instead, she feels someone holding her. Kanak embraced her, pulling her close and preventing her from getting hurt. He calls her by name and with a worried voice asks if she is hurt, while Bia looks at him embarrassed. Suddenly, however, Eusebia tenses up, her gaze fixed, as if she were terrified of something. Noticing her tension, Kanak runs his hand through Bia's hair, concerned, and asks if she is feeling pain. The moment is interrupted by one of Kanak's soldiers, who outside asks if he and the consort empress are all right. Kanak, still holding Eusebia, asks the soldier why they stopped so suddenly. The soldier bows, apologizing for the inconvenience, and informs that a tree has fallen on the road, blocking the way. However, he adds that the other soldiers are already resolving the issue and that they should be leaving soon. Kanak finds it strange, as it had not even been 2 days since they entered Archaea, and that tree was still standing. Upon hearing this, Bia begins to tremble. He feels her trembling hand on his chest and looks at his wife. Eusebia appears overwhelmed by fear. Her body visibly shakes, her fists clenched against her chest as if trying to contain the anguish that overwhelms her. Sweat runs down her face, and her wide blue eyes reflect the terror and tension that invade her at that moment. Our protagonist tells us that the power of the Guardians comes directly from Arganwood, and that, upon leaving the territory of Archaea, they are deprived of this blessing. A frightening truth that Dietrich had confided to her on the night before the wedding. At first, she believed he was lying just to scare her and force her to stay by his side. But Bia feels the magic draining away, as if it were slowly leaving her body, confirming Dietrich's terrible warning. And without her powers, she fears she won't be able to defend or protect herself. As she concludes this thought, Eusebia looks terrified in the direction of the trees. The ghost of the past returns to haunt her, whispering in her ear that all of this must be part of Dietrich's plan to assassinate her. In the end, he must have decided that killing you and blaming Kanak for your death to start a war is a simpler path. Poor Eusebia. Once again you will perish here, alone and in despair, mocks the ghost. Bia covers her ears with her hands, trying to block them out, as tears stream down her face. In despair, she cries and pleads for the ghost to stop talking. Kanak reaches out his hand towards Eusebia. He pulls her close and embraces her. With a firm voice, he asks her to breathe deeply and slowly. He asks her to look around, assuring her that nothing has happened and that she is safe. But even though she has stopped crying a bit, she is still trembling and gasping. While gently stroking her hair, Kanak continues in a calm yet firm tone, saying that there is no one there who wants to hurt her. Upon hearing Kanak's voice, she begins to calm down. Still shaken by fear, Eusebia finds comfort in Kanak's presence, burying her face in his chest while her fingers grip tightly onto the fabric of his clothing. The gesture, delicate yet filled with desperation and vulnerability, is an attempt to convince herself that she is safe. The scene shifts to a port illuminated by the starry night, signaling that the long journey by land to Riadon is coming to an end. The lights of the vessels in the lighthouse reflect on the dark waters, announcing that the next leg of the journey will be by sea. "I owe you an apology," Kanak says to Bia. Kanak sighs and replies that it is because he bothered her all day, and perhaps because of that, the journey to the port was even more exhausting for her. Kanak admits that he had deliberately sought her attention because he had the impression that Eusebia did not hold him in high regard. He states that, even knowing that a woman of her caliber would not be satisfied by his side, it is still hard to accept the truth. As he utters these words, Kanak tightens the fabric of his own clothing, revealing the tension and weight of his confession before Eusebia. He looks her in the eyes, determined, and says that it matters what she thinks of him. He will not annul the marriage, because he gives her his word that the peace between their kingdoms will remain intact. Blushing slightly, he simply asks her to please try to see him differently, as seeing her look at him with so much fear in her eyes saddens him. Eusebia looks at Kanak, curious and surprised. In her thoughts, she finally seems to understand why he is so different from her previous life. Because in the past, she never had the chance to truly talk to him. That is why she had never really thought about getting to know him for real before that day. With a hint of a smile, she asserts that she did not lie when she said she knew the stories of his deeds. Oh, the irony, thinks Bia, recalling that in order to gain more knowledge and better understand her enemy, she began to follow the records of Kanak's rise to power. Only that, the more she read about him, the more she began to doubt whether he was really the same person she had known in her past life. A former slave who fought to free others like him from the clutches of the old emperor. A cruel tyrant who kept everyone under oppression. This man, could he... Remembering this, Bia looks at Kanak and states that she does not fear him, nor does she dislike this marriage. "Thank you for helping me calm down back then, Kanak," says Eusebia. Upon hearing her call him by name, he is genuinely surprised. Embarrassed by Kanak's surprise, Bia plays with a strand of hair between her fingers while reminding him that he himself had asked her to call him by name. But the cute moment is interrupted by a voice from outside the carriage, informing His Majesty that they were approaching the port. Upon hearing this, Bia quickly moves closer to the window. Eusebia's face lights up, impressed by the sight. The port shines under the moonlight, reflected in the deep blue sea. Large ships with their sails raised wait anchored, while illuminated towers and lighthouses guard the entrance. That sight was also a confirmation that the future had begun to change. She is still alive and breathing, and still no war has begun between Archaea and Riadon. What lies ahead is still a mystery, but everything will be fine, says Eusebia aloud as she watches the carriage approach the majestic ship docked at the port. The scene cuts to a man hurriedly getting ready, adjusting his clothes in a rush while grumbling about what His Majesty is doing. The man with green hair is incredulous, not understanding why the wedding ceremony ended so quickly. Did he really run out of the chapel right after the vows? He asked the other man accompanying him, unable to comprehend the reason for such haste, when Kanak had spent an entire month talking about marrying the princess of Archaea. The man accompanying him reminds him that the emperor's carriage is already close to the port. "Is it really?" replies the man with green hair as he finishes adjusting his clothes in a hurry. He smiles and comments that, then it's time to find out what kind of lady his dear empress is. Meanwhile, at the port, Eusebia, upon exiting the carriage, is impressed by the imposing size of the ship before her. Kanak, who helps her down, explains that since the journey to Riadon is long, the vessel needs to be large enough to withstand the trip. He also asks her to be careful while descending, as the night is dark. Eusebia rebuffs him, saying that he worries too much and that she is paying attention. Literally, at the moment she finishes saying this, she slips. But Kanak quickly moves, extending his arm to catch her, and wraps her in a firm embrace before she falls, preventing her from getting hurt. He looks at her, slightly irritated for having just warned her to be careful. Eusebia thanks him, saying that she really should have listened to him. Kanak then holds Bia's shoulder with one hand and with the other begins to guide her along the path. Embarrassed, Bia tells him that she can walk on her own, but Kanak insists on helping her, worried that she might twist an ankle. While he talks, the man with green hair approaches them. He says he is truly surprised by the scene he is witnessing. Kanak refers to the man with green hair by the name of Oslin. Upon hearing this, Bia seems to recognize who he is. Oslin turns to Eusebia and, with a slight nod of respect, apologizes for the late introduction. Making a small bow, he introduces himself as Lord Oslin Venar. Our protagonist tells us that Oslin Venar is a man of humble origins, the son of a fallen baron, who managed to rebuild his house from rags to riches thanks to his extraordinary talent for turning everything into profit. And the lesson he learned from his own life was to judge others by merit, and not by lineage, which allowed him to recognize Kanak's greatness, even though his origin was that of a mere slave. And as Kanak's strategist, Oslin contributed enormously to the victory of the revolution and thus secured for himself a position of power in the court of the Riadon Empire. While Oslin talks with Kanak, Bia watches them and mentally scolds herself for having momentarily forgotten about him, as his name had always been mentioned alongside Kanak's in the Empire's conquests. Oslin notices Eusebia's gaze. He turns to her and politely asks if he can help her with anything. Embarrassed, Bia replies that at the moment she doesn't need anything. Then, Kanak introduces Oslin to his wife in a more informal manner, saying that he is not just a dear friend, but also a high-ranking official of the Riadon Empire. Eusebia understands her husband's words and introduces herself to Oslin as Eusebia Cataril, but quickly corrects herself, saying that she should now introduce herself as Eusebia Riadon. Hearing Bia use her surname makes Kanak happy and even blush a little, entering a brief ecstasy of happiness as Oslin and Eusebia finish greeting each other. Oslin suggests that they should board the ship, which makes Kanak snap out of his little trance and return to himself. Immediately, he tries to help Bia walk, but she, embarrassed, refuses, saying, "I told you I can walk on my own and I won't fall, Kanak." Oslin watches, incredulous at Kanak's attitude. At the same time, the other people in the area begin to whisper about the same scene, equally surprised by the Emperor's behavior. "How lovely to see our Emperor and our new Empress acting so intimately in public," says Oslin in a teasing tone. Bringing her hand to her mouth, Bia remembers that she just called Kanak by name in front of everyone, which is extremely inappropriate on her part. She begins to apologize, but Kanak interrupts her, affirming to everyone that she is his wife and therefore has every right to call him by name. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, propriety and decorum must be observed no matter what happens," says Oslin. Oslin reminds Kanak that he only calls him by name in private. Still, the Emperor continues to tease his friend, provocatively repeating what he had said earlier. Meanwhile, Eusebia watches with concern, realizing that the exchange of jabs is starting to turn into an argument. Seeing Kanak act so spontaneously with Oslin makes Eusebia reflect on how he acts with her, remembering how he quickly controlled his own temper when he realized she wasn't feeling well. He also worried about her when he noticed she had slipped. Perhaps he is the kind of person who reveals his more compassionate side when others are vulnerable. These thoughts about Kanak give Bia an idea to end the discussion between him and Oslin. She loudly calls Kanak's name, immediately attracting the attention of both. When everyone stares at her, Eusebia hesitates for a moment, feeling the overwhelming weight of attention focused on her. But she soon regains her courage and, bringing her hand to her forehead, says she is feeling dizzy and weak and would like to rest as soon as possible. Hearing his wife say she is about to faint, Kanak reacts as if he has been hit by an electric shock. He runs to her, apologizing for not having noticed earlier how tired she was. He firmly takes her in his arms and declares that he will take her immediately to her quarters, making her blush deeply and mentally regret her little plan. Oslin and the other servants of Kanak watch the scene, astonished and shocked, while Bia screams, asking Kanak not to carry her and insisting that he put her down. Inside the ship, Kanak proudly shows the beautiful room where Eusebia will stay. He looks at her and says that if she needs anything else, she just has to speak up. But noticing how red Bia is, Kanak asks if she might have a fever. Embarrassed, she assures him that she is fine. While trying to calm down and push away the memory of how embarrassing it was to be carried like that in front of everyone, something in the room catches Eusebia's attention. A beautiful green dress that is under the bed. She approaches the dress and asks if it is for her. Kanak responds with another question, wanting to know if she didn't like it. Gently touching the fabric, Bia smiles and says that, on the contrary, she likes it very much. The dress is beautiful, exactly the shade of green she likes. While observing the details of the dress, she tries to remember when someone gave her something so lovely in Archaea. She asks Kanak to meet the person who chose the dress for her, as she would like to thank them personally. Embarrassed, Kanak says that it won't be necessary because he was the one who chose the dress for her. Impressed by her husband's kind gesture, Bia's cheeks blush a little. "Thank you, I will take care of it with affection," says Eusebia, still a bit embarrassed. Trying to maintain his composure, Kanak replies that it's just a dress. Kanak tells her that he will let her rest a bit, especially since he has some urgent matters to attend to on the ship, but he will return as soon as he resolves them. Bia seems not to understand why he would return to her room. He leans toward her and explains that, of course, he will. After all, they are married now, and that married couples should sleep together. Eusebia then remembers that she had forgotten this little detail. Realizing that this probably means they will share the same bed that night, Eusebia panics. She, assuming again that he married her to have an heir, knew that eventually things like this would happen. Even so, she didn't imagine it would be so soon. She had presumed he would wait at least until they arrived in Riadon. Bia, still in silence, tries to understand why Kanak is in such a hurry. Is it because he finds me desirable? She thinks, blushing instantly after that thought. She realizes that even if he desires her, the moment he discovers that she is infertile, things will get complicated, and the sooner she lies down with him, the faster there is a chance he will find out. Noticing the saddened expression on his wife's face, Kanak gently touches her chin, forcing her to look at him, while she calls him by name. Bia quickly closes her eyes, imagining that her husband has decided not to wait any longer. But Kanak keeps his gaze steady on her, and explains that sharing a bed does not necessarily mean they will have to consummate the marriage. He releases her chin as Eusebia opens her eyes, surprised by his words. Kanak then explains that she is not just the Empress, but also a newlywed. If they slept in separate rooms, malicious rumors could start to circulate. And that is the only reason they are required to share a room, but Kanak reassures her by saying that he does not intend to force her to do anything she does not want. Eusebia, looking away, says that she knows she needs to fulfill her duties as a wife. Even with her saying that, Kanak declines the invitation, stating that he would prefer not to fulfill their couple's obligations on a swaying ship. Moreover, he adds that lying in bed with a reluctant partner is something he finds repulsive. Does that mean? She begins to say. But Kanak, already anticipating the question, interrupts her and replies that yes, he will wait until she is ready to consummate their marriage. This leaves her even more confused. Eusebia asks why he would do that if he was not eager for her to give him an heir. He gives a small smile and says that this is only their first night together. But even so, his beloved wife is already eager to secure the line of succession for the empire. Still in a slightly playful tone, he adds that he is truly blessed to have such a devoted wife willing to give him children. The emperor combs a strand of her hair between his fingers and says she can rest assured, as he is not in a hurry. He adds that if she truly wishes to give him an heir, she should at least start pretending that she loves him. Stepping away from her, he says in a serious tone that, although their marriage began as a political alliance, he genuinely hopes that a genuine love can grow from it. Not knowing how to respond, Eusebia simply watches as he leaves the room. Sometime later that same day, Kanak is in his office, deep in thought. He recalls what happened earlier, the surprise etched in his wife's eyes, and at the same time, how willing she seemed to give him a child. His head begins to throb, and he brings his hand to his temples, massaging them. We see Kanak's ears and neck turn red as he thinks that no matter how much he desires her, he knows he must wait until she is ready. But in practice, this is proving to be much more difficult than he imagined. But then he thinks that perhaps it is even better this way, that the fact she does not remember the past might make things easier for both of them. This way, they can start anew. His thoughts are interrupted by Olsen, who abruptly enters the office and questions. What is this story about sending our soldiers to protect the borders of Archaea? You never discussed this decision. Kanak calmly explains that the people of Archaea lost their guard because of them, so it is only fair that they be compensated for it. Olsen, agitated, walks towards Kanak, venting that Riadon is superior to Archaea in every way, so why not simply subjugate that weak nation? Growing increasingly irritated, he emphasizes that Kanak did not demand mining rights or treasures from the coffers in exchange for peace, and yet he is risking the lives of his loyal soldiers just for the hand of a spoiled princess. The Emperor casts a stern look at Olsen, visibly irritated, and warns him to choose his words more carefully. For Eusebia is not just a spoiled little princess, and he makes it clear that he would be willing to give up everything for her. Furious, Olsen incredulously asks how it is possible for him to act this way, if he has completely lost his mind. Kanak, annoyed, throws the paperwork that was on the table in his direction and orders him to leave his office immediately, saying that the room is stuffy enough without him there, steaming with anger. Olsen continues to be irritated, grumbling, "What do you mean, stuffy? It's freezing in here. What's your problem?" Meanwhile, Kanak calmly stands up and begins to leave the room. Night falls, and as the moonlight enters serenely and peacefully into the Empress's chambers, Eusebia wakes up not feeling very well. She does not understand what might be happening to her, but she is extremely nauseous. Her first hypothesis is that perhaps these are the side effects of Arganwood's power fading from her body. Determined not to let Kanak find out that she is losing her ability to use magic, she gets up. She tries to reach the door to ask one of the servants to bring her some medicine, but her vision is extremely blurred and hazy. Persisting, she finally manages to reach the door. Upon opening it, she asks the servant in front of her to bring her some medicine. But upon looking more closely at the servant, she realizes, stunned, that it is actually Kanak. He asks her if she is sick. She tries to pretend that nothing happened and turns to return to bed while quickly saying that she is fine, just with a slight headache. But Kanak grabs her by the arm, telling her that it is clearly not just a headache and that she is extremely pale. Eusebia feels as if her stomach is churning, even though she hasn't eaten anything different. And all that movement makes her feel even more nauseous. She tries to hold it in but ends up vomiting on Kanak. Still dizzy, she gasps for a few seconds while the Emperor continues to hold her. When she comes to her senses, she panics upon realizing what she has just done. She looks at Kanak, trying to gauge how furious he must be. But he is silent, just looking, only looking at his shirt, now soaked with vomit, and processing what happened. Eusebia takes a few steps back, instinctively distancing herself from him. Kanak sighs and says that she should let him call the doctor to examine her. But she trembles in panic and continues to back away, as if she hadn't heard what he just said. With her head spinning and her vision still blurry, she starts to apologize to him for what she did. Trying to think of a way to get out of that situation unscathed, she becomes even more desperate. Remembering that during the carriage ride, things hadn't gone very well, and that Kanak still believes she feels repulsed by him. And now I've gone and soiled his clothes too. He must be furious, Eusebia thinks, sinking deeper into panic, concluding that it wouldn't be surprising if he started to rethink their marriage. And at that moment, with her practically in a frenzy, the ghost of her past self returns to haunt her. It floats around Eusebia, mocking her and saying that she is incompetent, unable to do anything right, that she can't even do the bare minimum to please the Emperor. The ghost whispers in Bia's ear that she is sterile, and moreover has lost the magic she once had, the two only things that Kanak wanted from her. If she keeps making silly mistakes, her life will be ruthlessly cut short. And along with it, Archaea will also fall. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. I will clean up this mess immediately, she says with a trembling voice, still trying to remedy the situation. Kanak tells her that she doesn't need to worry about that she should focus on herself, as she is clearly feeling unwell. Still trembling, Eusebia moves a little closer to him, not understanding why he is being so kind, even after she has soaked his clothes in such a disgusting way. Realizing that his words seem not to be reaching Eusebia, he begins to take off his shirt. With his muscular chest exposed, he looks at his wife with a calm expression and, in a soothing tone, says, "There, problem solved." Explaining that he will simply put on a clean t-shirt and that it will be as if nothing happened, he emphasizes that she shouldn't feel guilty about something so trivial. But Bia insists on apologizing, saying that she fears she has displeased him. "And why should I be displeased?" he questions as he buttons up the clean shirt he just put on. He sits next to her, explaining that it would be monstrous to be angry or irritated with someone who is clearly suffering from seasickness. Bia, not being familiar with the expression, repeats the word as a question. Kanak gently rests his hand on Eusebia's forehead, explaining that it is exactly that. Seasickness, or dizziness from the sea. Realizing that she probably had never experienced that before, Kanak makes a rhetorical question, commenting that this must be Eusebia's first time on a boat. He blames himself for not having thought of that while preparing everything to welcome her, but assures Eusebia that he has solved the problem and that it shouldn't bother her again. Trying to ease the tension of the moment and make Eusebia more comfortable, Kanak comments that this situation reminds him of the time he was on the battlefields. He recounts that back then, he was always traveling from one battlefield to another. That's how he met a young man who began to follow him persistently, begging to be allowed to join the revolution. And this young man was an extremely persistent flatterer. Until one day on the way to a new battlefield, they came across a decapitated body. And the poor flatterer's stomach couldn't handle the sight, causing him to throw up everything he had eaten that morning. Kanak asks Eusebia if she could guess who the young man was. Visibly curious and entertained by the story, she simply shakes her head in denial. He then reveals that the flattering young man was Oslin. Incredulous, she asks if it was the same Oslin Vaynar she had met recently. Kanak just nods in confirmation. And instead of apologizing for having vomited, Kanak says while continuing the story, giving a small punch to the bench he is sitting on, irritated at the memory, that Oslin blamed him, saying that everything happened because he chose the road that led them to that scene. Incredulous with the story, Eusebia brings her hand to her mouth, trying to contain her laughter. But she can't help it and starts to laugh out loud, saying she never would have imagined that Oslin was such a delicate young man. The sight of his beloved wife laughing so spontaneously leaves Kanak mesmerized. Trying to maintain his composure, Kanak clears his throat and comments that after a few years, Oslin conveniently chose to forget how much of a crybaby he used to be in the past. Kanak explains that this is how the magic of time works. After a few trips, Eusebia will already be used to the sea breeze and won't even remember that she had seasickness. And what happened today will be nothing more than a tiny memory, like a small drop in the ocean. Kanak's kind words leave Bia thoughtful. She wonders if this is how he feels about the horrible things he had to witness in his past when he was still young. Just a small drop in the vast ocean of memories in his mind. If that is the case, how cruel must life have been for him? This makes Eusebia wish to know more about the true Kanak Riordan, and not just the cruel and rude man portrayed by the chronicles and rumors. The scene cuts to a man running, breathless, worried because he is very late. He knocks with trembling hands on the door. The knocks echo through the door and a voice calls for His Majesty. Inside the room, Kanak, standing next to Eusebia, immediately recognizes and calmly comments that it must be him. Eusebia gets up from the sofa where she was lying and asks if Kanak was expecting someone. Responding that yes, he explains that he had requested the presence of the royal doctor. Her question reminds him of the doctor's delay, and Kanak starts to grumble, irritated, complaining that a royal doctor should always be ready to work as quickly as possible. Eusebia, in turn, calms him down, reminding him that it is still dark outside and that it is the middle of the night. Kanak responds to the knocks, irritated, asking what the hell he is waiting for, demanding that he come in quickly and start working. The doctor enters cautiously, apologizes for the delay, and explains that he needed to check if everything was ready for the appointment. Still irritated, Kanak grumbles that he should stop making excuses and attend to the Empress right away. The doctor then bows, visibly embarrassed, and respectfully greets Eusebia. The red-haired man formally introduces himself as Simon, the royal doctor of the Riordan court. Bia is surprised to realize that the doctor is practically a boy, given how young he is. Noticing Eusebia's surprised look and silence, Simon feels slightly uncomfortable. Seeing his reaction, Eusebia realizes that she was staring at him in a rather impolite manner. She smiles and introduces herself as Eusebia, Princess of Archaea and now Empress of Riordan. She then thanks Simon for coming to attend to her in the middle of the night. Enchanted by the Empress's smile, Simon says it is a pleasure to serve her. He then feels an irritated gaze directed at him and, upon looking at Kanak, sees him visibly impatient. The Emperor states that now that they are done with small talk, Simon should evaluate the Empress, who had felt unwell earlier. As the doctor trembles with nervousness, Eusebia tries again to calm the Emperor, saying there is no need to pressure him, as she is feeling much better. But Kanak, concerned for his wife's health, insists that Simon must not be negligent in his duty. Kanak casts a new reproachful look at the doctor, causing Simon to quickly begin examining Eusebia. Seeing the doctor tremble more than a green stick, Bia concludes that he is probably afraid of Kanak. She places her hand over his, trying to calm him, and asks how old he is. Continuing to examine her, he replies that he is 18 years old. This makes Eusebia comment that he is exactly the same age as her younger brother. She praises him, saying that he must be extremely skilled to have become a court doctor at such a young age. Simon feels a bit embarrassed by the Empress's compliment and humbly responds that he still has much to learn. Eusebia asserts that she is sure Simon must be highly qualified for the job, as she knows her husband would never place an unqualified man in such an important position. "Isn't that right, Kanak?" says our protagonist, smiling at the Emperor. Trying not to lose his composure, Kanak confirms that indeed, Simon has an extremely agile mind and memorizes things easily. He explains that he brought him to the court precisely for this reason, hoping that one day he would become useful. After all, not just anyone can perfectly memorize human anatomy at such a young age. Simon is deeply touched by the Emperor's praise. Realizing that her discreet plan had worked, Eusebia comments to him that, as he just heard from the Emperor himself, he is valuable to the Empire and to the Emperor, so he doesn't need to be so anxious in his presence. Still a bit embarrassed, he says he feels honored to serve the Empire and their highnesses. And although he is not a man of many talents, he promises to serve in the best way he can. Simon firmly holds Eusebia's hand as he says this. Kanak notices this but remains silent. The Empress thanks Simon, saying it is good to know she is in good hands. Simon prescribes some medication for Eusebia and leaves, leaving her and Kanak alone again. Kanak comments that Simon is an extremely shy boy who rarely approaches people. Seeing how he acted with Bia, he concludes that he must have had an excellent first impression of her. Eusebia, who had just taken her medication, comments that this is a good thing. Bia affirms that yes, after all, it is good for her to get closer to the people who are part of his inner circle. She then asks if he sees any problem with that. Perhaps out of jealousy, Kanak questions her if holding Simon's hand is the way she found to get closer to him. Eusebia is startled to notice her husband's clearly upset tone. She approaches her husband and apologizes to him, believing that he probably expects his wife to keep a certain distance from other men. Kanak says she doesn't need to apologize as he wasn't trying to scold her or give her a moral lesson. Even so, Eusebia explains that Simon reminds her of her younger brother and that, seeing him feeling so pressured, she couldn't just stay quiet and do nothing. Bia continues explaining that, regarding holding Simon's hand, she was merely following her husband's example. When he held her in the carriage while she was panicking, it gradually calmed her down. Eusebia explains that it was he who showed her how the comforting touch of someone can help in moments of panic. But in the future, she promises to be more mindful of how she approaches others. Kanak is slightly touched by his wife's observation and, as if remembering something, begins to search for something in his pocket. When she opens her mouth to ask what he is doing, Kanak puts a candy in her mouth. Chewing, Eusebia asks what it is, and he explains that it is a candy to take away the bitter taste of the medicine she had to take. She lights up upon realizing the flavor of the candy Kanak gave her and asks if it is raspberry candy, revealing that this is her favorite flavor. Kanak, seeing his wife happy, hands her a jar with the rest of the candies, saying she can eat as much as she wants since they are her favorites. While Eusebia chews excitedly, he can't help but mentally compare her to a cute rabbit. Eusebia, with her eyes shining with joy, declares that she is eating until she is completely satisfied. He approaches her and comments that she is eating so eagerly that she looks like a little rabbit nibbling on a leaf. They exchange glances for a second in silence, and the closeness of Kanak's face to hers makes our protagonist's cheeks flush immediately. Kanak quickly stands up, interrupting the romantic tension between them. He says that the medicine Simon gave her should start taking effect and that she should try to sleep a little. As he steps away, she asks if he isn't going to sleep too, but Kanak replies that he still needs to review some documents. But he adds that he asked for the documents to be brought there, so he can keep her company while he works. Moreover, he admits that he doesn't feel comfortable leaving her alone until he is sure she is okay. He wishes her a good sleep and assures her that she can rest easy, as he will be by her side. The night goes on as Kanak is focused on reading the documents at a table near the bed where Eusebia is sleeping. She wakes up and watches him for a few moments. He really had kept his promise and hadn't left the room. In her thoughts, she acknowledges that he is not offended by her lack of etiquette and, on the contrary, shows care and genuine concern for her well-being. Does he really see me as a wife who must learn to love and protect? Eusebia questions herself silently. If this political marriage can bring lasting peace between their peoples, perhaps she can also learn to love and protect him. But suddenly, the image of Dietrich appears in her mind, saying that it was a dream beyond her reach. Startled by Dietrich's words echoing in her mind, Eusebia suddenly awakens, trembling under the covers. She grips the bedsheet, tormented by the thought that she has omitted some things from Kanak, especially the fact that she will never be able to give him the heir he desires. And as soon as he finds out, he will probably discard her without hesitation. And all his kindness and generosity would turn into cruelty in no time. She tightly closes her eyes, scolding herself for dreaming too much. She knows she cannot lose focus and is there to protect Archaea from being destroyed. For a minute, she wonders if she should let Kanak perceive her concerns. Perhaps he would help her. Denying the last thought, Eusebia turns in bed, hiding her face in the pillow as her thoughts torment her. Certain that if Kanak discovers the truth, it will all have been in vain. Unaware of his wife's whirlwind of thoughts, Kanak glances briefly at the bed, as if he could somehow feel the anguish of his beloved. The next morning, the ship sails majestically across the seas. Eusebia, who had fallen asleep after that whirlwind of thoughts, wakes up and, still drowsy, realizes that Kanak has gone somewhere. The scene cuts to a maid suggesting with concern that Eusebia rest a little longer so she can fully recover. Wearing Kanak's gift, our beautiful protagonist tells the maid that she feels rejuvenated after a good night's sleep and that a brief walk outside will do her good. As she walks outside, Eusebia says that besides this being her first time traveling by ship, it would be a waste to sleep the whole time inside the cabin. As soon as she steps into the outdoor area, a gust of wind and brightness hits her squarely. But when she looks outside, her eyes widen in surprise, and the flush on her face reveals the sudden impact of the sight before her. Before her, the sea stretches vast and shimmering, an infinite blue carpet reflecting the intense glow of the sun. So, this is what the sea really looks like, she thinks, amazed. but she is startled by the firm voice echoing in the distance. "Hail to the Empress." She turns with a gentle smile and greets the soldiers who saluted her. They seem a bit tense, and Eusebia notices they carry the same look as Oslin when she first met him, a clear sign that they are still cautious and suspicious of her. She understands their concern. After all, to those men, she is nothing but a stranger. Moreover, Riadon is a newly emerged empire. What Kanak really needs is not the magical pedigree of Archaea, but rather a consort from the nobility of Riadon, capable of helping him gain greater support from his subjects. Yet, instead of meeting his people's expectations, Kanak chose to marry a foreign princess from a small, crumbling kingdom. Hence, their barely concealed distrust. Or even a clear and open, "I don't like you." Bia reflects, worried about what awaits her in Riadon. Eusebia is pulled from her thoughts by Simon's voice, calling her with some urgency. He runs towards her, happy to have finally found her. He had been searching for her all over the ship. Eusebia steps forward, saying that if he is worried about her discomfort yesterday, she assures him that she is feeling well and that the medicine he gave her worked like magic. But Simon says he is concerned about her catching a cold from being outside for too long since it is a bit chilly. "And if it comes to that, know that your negligence will not be overlooked, court physician," says Kanak's deep voice, making Simon panic. Approaching Eusebia, Kanak says he was worried when he returned to the cabin and did not find her. He picks her up, saying that they should return inside. She asks him to put her down, but he argues that the ship is rocking too much and he doesn't want to see her slip again. Meanwhile, Simon sighs in relief that he won't be facing Kanak's wrath today. Kanak carries her through the ship's internal corridors while she protests, asserting that their subjects must hate seeing their emperor act that way. He then retorts ironically, asking if now the problem is his etiquette. Worried, she explains that he is a figure of authority for his people, and that it is inappropriate to be seen carrying a woman in his arms everywhere. He suddenly calls her by name, making her heart race. Kanak brings his face close to hers, making her blush as he says he has something he should have told her, saying that he has something he should have mentioned to her earlier. He gently rests his forehead against hers and declares tenderly that this is the reason he sought the crown. With a firm voice, Kanak reveals his ideal. He wanted to change things, to build a country where everyone could live in freedom, free from the chains of etiquette and hierarchy. As he settles her on the bed, he asserts that she should not worry about what his subjects will think, for those who serve him closely have learned to respect him for who he truly is, and those who dared to underestimate him have long since gone. Eusebia gets up to argue with him, but ends up bumping into some books that were on the bed. She curiously looks at two colorful covered books. Holding one of them in her hand, she looks at Kanak and asks what they are. He says he brought the books for her while she was sleeping so that she would have something to pass the time with since there isn't much to do in the cabin. Bia is impressed to realize that there are books inside the ship. Kanak then explains that they are excellent company for long journeys, and that those volumes were brought from the palace library in Riadon. He asks if Eusebia does not like to read, and she quickly hugs the book she is holding, confidently stating that she loves to read. Excited, she says that whenever she has a book she tries to read, but lately she has been quite busy. Kanak then suggests that, if that is the case, they should spend some time reading together. The two spend some time reading, and Eusebia, enchanted by the pages before her, becomes increasingly impressed with the grandeur of the Riadon Empire. She turns the pages of the book and notices that, despite being old and rare, it has been kept in excellent condition. Glancing at Kanak, she remembers having heard that the Riadon Library is one of the largest on the continent. Perhaps his taste for books is the reason for that. It seems that the more time she spends with him, the more she discovers new sides of him. She had always imagined him as a brutish soldier, ready only for battle. She would never have imagined that he was someone capable of spending hours reading books for simple pleasure. As she reflects, she notices that Kanak furrows his brow, deeply focused on the book he is reading. She smiles, finding it adorable, feeling happy to see him so immersed and transformed by concentration. Eusebia recalls that reading has always been her favorite pastime. As she spent long hours alone in the palace, she found in books a remedy for loneliness, a way to know the lives and thoughts of people she would never have the chance to meet. But now, she thinks, casting a glance at Kanak reading beside her, she lies down on the bed. Now she knows what it is like to have someone who understands her enthusiasm for books. It would be so nice if the life waiting for me in Riadon were calm and peaceful. Eusebia wishes as she begins to fall asleep. Some time passes, and Kanak gently shakes her, calling her name as he tries to wake her. Sleepy, she looks at him confused. He then warns her that the ship is docking at the port and that, at any moment, they must be ready to enter the imperial palace. They then board the carriage that will take them to the palace, and Eusebia, worried, asks if he shouldn't make a public appearance first. After all, he is returning with a foreign princess as his wife. His subjects must have been eagerly awaiting this distraction. Kanak replies that in a few days he will make a public statement on the matter, and then his subjects will have the distraction they so desire to satisfy their curiosity. A little embarrassed, Kanak admits that, if possible, he would like to formally introduce her to the people only after they have a proper wedding ceremony in the capital. After all, what happened in Archaea was merely a formality, not a true celebration. Eusebia tilts her head, a bit curious, thinking that the ceremony in Archaea had been simple but acceptable. A proper ceremony will be important to cement her place as consort queen, explains Kanak as they enter the palace. The imperial palace clearly reveals itself to be much larger and more majestic than that of a small kingdom like Archaea. The scene then shifts to the maids who formally present themselves to the new empress. At the front of the group, a woman introduces herself as Marianne, the head maid of the imperial palace. Bowing politely before Eusebia, Marianne informs her that all preparations have been made to ensure she feels comfortable. Bia thanks her for that. Marianne then suggests they take a small tour of the palace to help Eusebia feel more at home. The palace halls shine under imposing chandeliers and golden details, while soft light filters through the windows, enhancing the grandeur of the place. And Eusebia notices this, reflecting that everything in that palace seems a true testament to the wealth and prosperity of Riadon. This makes her understand a little better why Archaea lost the war in her past life. They underestimated Kanash and failed to recognize the importance of understanding the enemy. Looking out the window, something outside catches Bia's attention. She points to the building, clearly different from the others, and asks Marianne why that distinction exists. Marianne explains that the mansion is a recent addition to the palace. And noticing the Empress's curious gaze at the mansion, Marianne asks Eusebia if she would like to visit the place. Bia is intrigued, as the building seems an exact copy of the royal palace of Archaea. Despite this, Eusebia replies that perhaps she can visit the place another time. But for now, she prefers to complete the tour of the main palace. Marianne understands the request, and then they continue walking through the corridors of the main palace, while the head maid explains the function of each room. She opens a white door with golden details, richly adorned, and explains that these are the Empress's quarters. Therefore, this will be her room while she is in the main palace. The room is spacious and bright, adorned with luxurious furniture made of intricately carved wood with golden details. In the center, red velvet sofas and armchairs surround a table set with flowers, candlesticks, and elegant trays. In the background, the imposing four-poster bed stands out, surrounded by light and delicate curtains. Impressed by the grandeur of the room, Eusebia comments that perhaps the room is too extravagant for her. Marianne does not respond to the Empress's comment. Instead, she changes the subject and informs her that they took the liberty of preparing a hot bath for Eusebia to relax after the long journey. Still impressed, Eusebia runs her hand over the soft sheets of the bed, while Marianne comments that she will remind all the staff to ensure everything is in order for tonight. For tonight? Eusebia asks innocently. Yes, your Majesty and Madame will spend their first night together in the palace, says Marianne, causing Eusebia to freeze with anxiety. The scene shifts to the night. Kanak, arms crossed, is in the Empress's room, noticing that the environment is a bit different from usual. With some embarrassment, Eusebia explains that Marianne and the other staff prepared the room in a special way that night, to make it a memorable experience for both of them. Memorable night, huh? Now that explains the clothes, says Kanak, casting a fleeting glance at Eusebia. Eusebia is wearing a beautiful dark blue dress. Embarrassed by his comment, she asks if the dress is too much. Slightly averting his gaze, Kanak replies that, on the contrary, the dress looks perfect on her. Perhaps even too perfect. He states that he promised to wait until she was ready to consummate the marriage, but seeing her like that, he admits it is hard to resist. Kanak clears his throat, trying to control his impulses. He walks towards the bed, saying that she must be tired, so it would be better for them to sleep. A bit insecure, Eusebia apologizes to Kanak, confessing that she doesn't know much about matters of the bedroom, unlike him. Kanak turns to her and replies that there is no reason to apologize, as he is not an expert either. Blushing slightly, he admits that he has never had that kind of intimacy with anyone. Surprised, Eusebia spontaneously exclaims, "Really?" Kanak asks why she is so surprised to know this, and she, realizing she was a bit rude, explains that because he is an emperor, there are rules that encourage such things to help ensure the succession to the throne. He sits on the bed, worried. With a needy yet insecure look, he asks if perhaps she would prefer him to be a more experienced man in these matters. Kanak's gaze reveals his fear of not being enough, but also the sincerity and desire to be accepted by Eusebia. And this enchants her, as she never imagined that man could show such a vulnerable expression. Noticing his wife's silence, Kanak tries to break the tension with a joke, saying that now they have a problem on their hands since he can't just go out and educate himself on the subject. Quickly, Eusebia responds that it is nothing like that she does not want someone experienced. She just found the situation unexpected. In a more serious tone, Kanak admits that this is indeed a problem, as neither of them really knows how to initiate something more intimate. He holds her hand and says that maybe they should practice a little together, commenting that he heard the first step is always to hold hands. Kanak then suggests that perhaps after this they should lie side by side and see where that would lead them. Eusebia visibly blushes. Her heart beats strongly and silently thinks, "What should I do?" She agrees with the suggestion but admits that she would like to change clothes first, as she feels uncomfortable in the dress she is wearing. Bia starts to move away from the bed, saying she will go to the other room to change clothes. Kanak asks her to wait, getting up and walking towards her. Gently placing his hand on her shoulder, he comments that the dress she is wearing has buttons on the back. "I can help you unbutton, if that's okay with you." Kanak's hand reaches Eusebia's back, lightly touching one of the buttons of her dress. With the atmosphere charged with delicate tension and expectation, Kanak asks Eusebia for permission again before proceeding. With her permission, the scene shifts to the two of them sitting on the edge of the bed, still enveloped by the atmosphere of anticipation. Kanak slowly unbuttons her dress. He finishes unbuttoning the dress, revealing her bare back under the soft light coming through the window. Eusebia slightly moves her shoulder, a discreet gesture that betrays her nervousness and the anxiety of the moment. Kanak gently moves her hair aside, revealing even more of her back. He feels the urge to touch her, and his hand moves almost instinctively towards her, but Kanak interrupts the gesture. The pause reveals his hesitation, not from a lack of desire, but from the care of not crossing the line before Eusebia is truly ready. Eusebia thanks him for his help, and Kanak steps back, softly saying he is happy to be able to help her. The scene changes. We see Eusebia lying on the bed, clearly embarrassed, recalling what happened a little while ago, and scolding herself for making the emperor do the work of a servant. Kanak calls her in a low tone, asking if they are not going to practice. Lying next to her, Kanak extends his hand towards her, asking her to come closer, while gently protesting that they should be holding hands. She approaches him as if fulfilling her part of the agreement, and they finally hold each other's hands. Eusebia, trying to make conversation, asks if he is not feeling uncomfortable, since he had his own room during the trip, and now it must be strange to share the bed with her after getting used to sleeping alone. Kanak, however, replies that it is not uncomfortable for him, and that in fact he spent every night in her room during the trip. He recounts a night when he woke up because he heard Bia talking in her sleep. She was tense and clearly whimpering, having nightmares. He gently stroked her hair, concerned, and he stayed by her side to comfort her. Kanak explains that he had promised her he would take care of her, and since she was having nightmares, he felt happy to be able to stay by her side to calm her. Realizing how affectionate and attentive Kanak is, Bia confesses that he is not at all like she thought. She says that before they crossed paths, all she heard about him were frightening rumors, so she expected a bloodthirsty and ruthless emperor. But he is surprisingly easier to approach than she imagined, Bia continues, as Kanak extends his free hand towards her. She admits that she feared she was not what he was looking for in a wife. But Kanak surprises her by tenderly caressing her face, interrupting her words. Her heart races in response to his touch, while Kanak asserts that he could not have wished for a better wife, and that he has never regretted sealing their union before the altar. He glides the tips of his fingers over her skin, gently strumming her, while affirming that she will always be needed there, by his side. These words make Eusebia freeze with worry. With a more serious voice, she replies that she is happy to hear that, and that she is very grateful to him. But our protagonist's mind decided to sabotage her again, making her believe that she should not be swayed by emotions, and that Kanak is only with her because he wants a woman capable of bearing an heir who can use magic. The next morning, Eusebia notices a vase with roses beside her bed that was not there the day before. She gently touches the roses, wondering if one of the servants placed those flowers there. Marianne enters the quarters, asking if Eusebia had a pleasant night. Excited, Bia replies that yes and wishes her a good day. Bia comments that she had a very relaxing night and thanks her for the flowers, adding that their scent is quite pleasant. Marianne respectfully bows, asking if there is anything else she would like. Eusebia notices that Marianne is extremely diligent in her work and always very polite, but just like the soldiers on the ship, she keeps her defenses up all the time when she is near her, as if she does not fully trust her presence. Not letting this affect her, she tries to think positively and concludes that lamenting will not help her at all. After all, she has so many things to do that self-pity would only waste her time. In response to Marianne, Eusebia said that after breakfast, she would like to see the castle's library. Just like the rumors, the library of the Riadon Palace is indeed grand. Eusebia is impressed with the number of books. The servant near Marianne says that the Empire has gradually accumulated books, including several unique ones that have never been published. While he speaks, she quickly turns in his direction, seeming to have noticed something. She asks if there is a section of the library dedicated to books on magic, and the man promptly replies that yes, but that this section is private and can only be accessed with the Emperor's permission. Smiling, he says that logically this includes the Empress. Excited, Eusebia asks him to take her to the section in question. She runs her hands over the books, anxious about all the information that may be contained in that place. Perhaps one of these books has information about the guardians of Archaea. While looking at the books thoughtfully, a particular book catches her attention. A bright green book with golden details, she seems to recognize the book. Could it be the one she is thinking of? And that's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the story. I think, as you could tell during the narration, I really liked this story. I just really wish Bia would stop assuming things in her head. I also missed Xander, her younger brother. He only appeared a little. I hope that later on we see more of him, right? And Kanak. What a man. I'm sure he also traveled back in time, just like our protagonist. There's no way he didn't come back. I'm super curious to know when the two will discover that they returned together. Anyway, tell me your theories and what you thought in the comments. Oh, one more thing. I tried to talk more with you during the story because I was excited. But let me know, do you prefer that I comment during the narration or just more at the end of the video? The name of this series is My Sweet Enemy, Thy Name is Husband, and our recap went up to chapter 32. And if you want more, don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Kisses and see you next time.